Hilary, would you like to introduce yourself and tell the people a little bit about yourself?
Thanks, Kieran. Hi, I'm Hilary Cooke. I'm director of Merlin Consultancy, and our speciality really is developing people and performance in hospitality companies and hospitality businesses. So I've had a lifelong career in hospitality and love it. And I'm really happy to be able to help people to find jobs in hospitality because it's such a great career.
Isn't it just? Isn't it just? Well, we're gonna dig straight in, and we're gonna look at a couple of different things. We're gonna think about kind of how we can help people find the right job for them, and then really kind of understanding their skills and their own personal values, and then how we're gonna make potentially match that up to future employers. So, if we kickstart in with the kind of understanding your skills, are there any tools out there that can help me to understand my core skills as an individual?
That's a really good question. I know it gets asked a lot. So core skills, I like using core skills because it's better than using strengths. Because if you look at strengths, you've also got to look at weaknesses. And I don't kind of go along with the strengths and weaknesses argument. For me, my biggest strengths are the things that my parents would say were my biggest weakness, like being stubborn or being aggressive when I'm faced with difficulties. But actually, when the chips are down, those are my biggest strengths. So I think strengths and weaknesses are contextual. I think skills are really useful to think about because it's what you have naturally, and it's also what you have learned, and also what you can learn. So some people might just have a natural skill for learning stuff. So I think it goes along with what you like doing. I think a skill is also a preference. So it's also something which is hard to identify in yourself. It's a question I ask groups of people in terms of doing their own skill finding. And people sit there for a long time scratching their head saying, well, I'm not really sure what I'm good at. Not really sure what my skills are or what my strengths are, which is a shame because I think you should know what they are. So yeah, there are some tools. If you go online, if you just Google or search engine skills or skill inventory or what are my skills or find my skills, there's a whole range of little free tests and things that you can go through. Now, it doesn't matter in my mind, it doesn't matter if you don't identify your skills, but what that will do is increase your vocabulary around what your skills might be. So some of us can't talk about our skills because we don't have the words for them, or it's stuff that we do naturally and we've always done that we don't realize we do, so we don't actually have a word for it. So skills are important that you can identify them and name them. So just doing those tests and thinking through what your skills are is important, so that you've got a good inventory or a good collection of skills to talk about when you go to interview. Another way of accessing them is to ask people that you have worked with in the past, ask your bosses from the past, ask people. That's good to ask because it expands your network, but also asking people who've worked with you, what do you think my skills are? People will give you all sorts of ideas and answers for stuff that you do well, that you're really cool at, that you didn't realize that you did. And that's really confidence building as well, to ask other people. And I think if everything else fails, there's three kind of bundles of skills, which running a business myself, we call finders, grinders, and minders. So when you're in business, you may have a real skill for going and finding stuff out, finding the business, and really loving finding stuff out and working on new knowledge. You might be really good at getting stuff done, grinding it through, being on the floor, doing operational stuff, really loving the mechanics of the business. Or you might love the minding piece, so looking after people or administrating, looking after the data, for example. All those sorts of things are minding jobs. So between finding, grinding, and minding, every business needs those skill sets, but they're not necessarily all in the same person. So just thinking through what you like doing, what you love doing. And also, if you come up with some skills, try and work back through your work life and come up with evidence of where you've used them, because that's going to be the next question. You say you're good at something. Yeah, I've got this skill. So I'd be saying, so where have you used it? Give me some ideas of how you've deployed that skill. So you need to have some evidence around those skills as well, I think.
I agree. So that idea of fun of finding, grinding, and minding. First of all, I love that. That's ace. Secondly, so how do you define that? Because as you were talking, and you were talking through finding, I was like, yep, okay, I could probably put myself in there. Then you were talking about grinding. I'm like, oh yeah, I love being in the heart of operations, seeing things happen. And then you talk about minding. I'm like, well, people is my passion. Developing individuals. And all of a sudden, you've given me three options, and I'm like, but I could be any one of those three options. I could be all three of them. How am I going to narrow that down into there?
Choose the one you like. Now, remember that you and I are running businesses. So we have a mindset that makes us do all those things because that's what you have to do in a business.
True.
And in maybe a higher management role, you'd need to be able to understand how all of those work together and how all of those sync together. If you really dig down through your past, you've probably got a leading preference, I would guess.
I'm going to go with minding, I think.
Yeah.
That was my thing.
And it might be administrative. Minding might also be administrative. It might have a really strong organizing skill, a really strong administrative skill.
No, not for me, Hilary.
No, so that maybe maybe the minding falls back from the other two. I just think about what you like doing. That's because what we like doing is probably what we're good at, because we're good at doing it because we like doing it, and we like doing it because we're good at it. Those are fairly joined up. It's not that difficult.
Yeah, those two things are not they're not exclusive, are they? I think.
No.
So sitting down and kind of reviewing that and kind of thinking, right, so throughout my career, I've enjoyed doing this, I've enjoyed doing that, and then maybe kind of start to rank them as kind of through those levels of enjoyment, and that will help you kind of define down into where you would kind of think, right, okay, this is my absolute joy.
Yeah. I love doing this. I think when jobs are scarce or our confidence is scarce, the danger is, or the risk is, that we plump for something which just does. This will do. And I get that, because we've all got bills to pay, and maybe it is a job that will tide you over, but it might also be a job where you can grow into something amazing, where there are amazing opportunities and you don't know before you get in there. But don't do a job that you don't enjoy, that's not a skill set that's developing you.
Yep. So again, I'm a big fan. I was chatting to Janine Pretorius from the Ivy Group, and she was talking about her journey into hospitality. And I think it's one that actually a lot of us have maybe shared. So Janine came from South Africa. She was on a study break, and she spent some time in the UK and just worked in hospitality, just as a kind of a little money earner. But that moment, that time, just ignited that spark in her, and she was just like, "Oh wow, this is a thing that can really work for me." So it really being open to that idea and thinking, well, I'm just going to try something out. I'm going to try something new and seeing where it can go can be really successful for you. I
think that's so true. And so many people fall into hospitality, fall in love and never leave it, which is great. And I think there's also an element of you may have skills which are not yet being used because the job where you will use them doesn't yet exist. That's so exciting to think about what might be, us sitting here doing this, the conversation we had before at the beginning of the year. I didn't know that Zoom existed.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have dreamt of doing, well, maybe Skype and doing stuff on screen, but the amount of screen time we've done in the last 6 or 7 months has been incredible. There's jobs out there that are going to be developed and evolve in hospitality that don't yet exist, that you might have a great skill set for. So it's not as much about the here and now, but also what's in the future. What can you develop in your skills for the future? It's really exciting, I think.
Yeah, massively, absolutely massively. And a lot of people that I'm speaking to at the moment are kind of just seeing the pace in which kind of change has happened over the last few months. And it would be really easy to look at the situation and think, well, there's a lot of negativity attached, but there's a huge amount of positivity around the opportunity that's been created. And I think you're right. Just look to that and think, right, okay, I've got this skill now, and it might not feel that actually it's easy to apply to what I do here and now, but in 6 months' time, in 12 months' time, in 2 years' time, well, actually, then the opportunity is going to come along. So I'm going to keep that sharp. I'm going to keep kind of working on that and kind of working that muscle.
Absolutely. And things like resilience are really important. So if you're going for an interview and this is the 6th interview you've been to and you've been knocked back time after time, then you're demonstrating resilience as a skill. So use it. Really factor it into the conversation. Just use it. Use what you have and what you're developing as a skill set. Don't be beaten down by adversity. It's resilience is a really important thing right now, and flexibility, and being able to being willing to do stuff. All of that willingness is a huge skill which is in demand right now.
I think it's finding that line between kind of skills and attributes as well, isn't it? I think you've kind of, in hospitality, kind of skills are useful, but the attributes and the kind of characteristics and the traits that you demonstrate are the thing that will potentially really kind of get you over the line with kind of getting into that role that is the thing that's going to bring you the absolute joy you're looking for. So who can help you to understand that, and who can help you to develop? You said kind of go away and look for some help and ask for some kind of opinions from people around you. Who would you go to?
Look online on the internet. Use the internet because the internet's free, right? And there's a lot of really good people on pages like LinkedIn and on Twitter who are giving stuff away to help you do skills. But a lot of the recruitment agencies, the good ones, are helping people to find jobs and being really generous.
What about maybe people who maybe know us personally? Maybe thinking about kind of possible kind of mentor kind of situations, things like that. Would you recommend that as an idea?
Yeah, absolutely. If you can get connections with mentor or a coach, someone who, funnily enough, this morning on LinkedIn there was a post that I saw, not somebody I knew. She was a second level connection, so it wasn't someone that's connected to me. And she was going off for an interview, her third interview, and she put up a thing saying she was nervous about this interview and she was wishing for the best. And she'd put an emoji on, which was not, or a graphic on her posting, which was inappropriate for what she wanted to do. It was somebody that was doing this and looking really worried.
Yeah.
So I wrote to her, I don't know her, but I said, look, change your image, change your thinking, don't be nervous, be excited. And by the way, if you want to message me, I'll do your free coaching session before you go, so as you can have a better chance of getting the job. There are all sorts of people, and it's nice to do that sort of thing, because I can. I've got, if it takes me half an hour, I've got half an hour to spare for someone if it helps them to get a job. There are all sorts of sites and people posting job vacancies. Just keep your eye on LinkedIn, keep an eye on expanding your network, ask people and people around you, your family, your friends, people that you've worked with before, your ex-bosses. Reach out and get a skill set that gives you confidence. Get it written down. And like I say, if you write it down, you know the words for it, you know what to call it.
Which is key, I think, when it comes to kind of selling that.
Because I think what you want to mine those things for is so you can talk about them in an interview. And if you haven't got the words for them, you're going to stumble in that question at the interview. So when they say, what are you really good at, or what are your skills? And I can't. You can't. The brain doesn't work like that. You can't conjure those up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Unless you practiced it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was chatting to Charlie Benz from Cooke Hotels last week, and we were talking about the kind of the Zoom world and the kind of various interruptions that can kind of come across there. And how people deal with those interruptions is a really good indicator of how they will work for you. So, I kind of think if somebody's child comes to them, well, that child needs something from them. That's perfectly natural. It's a human thing. So watching them just kind of turn around, answer that question, yeah, no problem at all, smashing, and then come straight back into the conversation. Well, that tells me that actually, they've got the ability to multitask. They can deal with one situation, drop out, and then come right back to where they were without dropping a beat. Already, I'm kind of thinking, well, in hospitality, I want somebody who can do that. I want somebody who can switch between tasks relatively quickly without dropping their focus.
Yeah, that's really important. So some of the skills that you might want to explore are not that obvious. when you, because they're part of, like you said, their attributes. And I was thinking this morning about stuff to talk about with you, and when one of them is about empathy and creating empathy with people that we have to do in hospitality really quite quickly and effectively. So you need to be able to demonstrate some of that empathy creation from the moment you walk into the interview. And when we're in, I don't like presenting very much, but I have to do quite a lot of it, but I still get really nervous, especially if it's a big group or people I don't know. Mm-hmm. So we have a technique in presentation skills, and I teach presentation skills as well, believe it or not, even though I really don't like doing it much myself. You have a theme in presentation skills where you go for what are called 2 nods and a smile. So when you first meet somebody, if you can get somebody nodding, and be even better smiling, then you've got a start into empathy.
Yeah.
And we have such a great opportunity right now at the beginning of an interview to get 2 nods and a smile, because you can walk into the interview and say, isn't it weird now that we can't shake hands? Or doesn't it still feel weird that you can't shake hands? And you're nodding away.
Absolutely.
And somebody else is smiling, and you can just start off the interview by something that's obvious. When we're presenting, it's really stupidly obvious things that you say to a group or a crowd, like, oh, so you all got here, you were okay then this morning? Like, obviously they did, because they're sitting there looking at you, but they nod because that's what people do. So if you can train your interviewer to nod from the moment you walk in the door and at least give you a smile, you're a long way into it in terms of creating empathy.
You know, and I think you're right. That moment where you kind of say, we used to be able to, like, we'd shake hands, or maybe I would hug you. I don't know. Yeah. Straight away, it's kind of, you're making people smile, and you've got them kind of thinking, yeah, we are in this together.
Yeah.
And as soon as somebody thinks we're in this together, then, well, we've got them on the right road, haven't we?
Yeah, but one of the ways we used to get empathy with people or get connection with people was through the handshake. You judge people in an interview by the handshake. You might as well judge people by not doing the handshake now, because you can use that to your advantage. And maybe to look at that interviewer like as a customer, because they're buying your skills. So treat them like a customer.
It's a simple win. So are you sitting down and we're having a conversation? We're starting to think about kind of company culture and company values. What if I want to start thinking about how do I find a company culture that works for me? Well, first of all, I need to understand what culture actually is. How would you kind of help me to understand that?
It's an interesting question, because culture is not a thing. It's a whole bunch of stuff. Really, it's the easiest way of defining culture, I think, is the way we do things around here. And then you get there's kind of three. Well, one theory is that there's kind of 3 levels of culture. So there's the sort of what are called the artifacts, the physical things that you can touch and see. So what the building looks like, the state of the building, the uniforms, the hard stuff, the website, the stuff you can see and feel, and that all sets the culture. The branding, the physical branding, what they stand for, what the words in the marketing materials are, all that sort of thing. So there's the cultural, what your welcome, what your invitation to interview was like, what the tone of the letter that you received or the email that you received. All of those things are artifacts. And then there's a sort of what Edgar Schein, who was a writer who wrote a lot about organizational culture, would say is the second level, is the espoused values. So where on the website can you find out about the cultural things, how they feel about their customers, what are the values regarding corporate social responsibility, for example, what do they find important, what sort of things get given value? Is there, do you walk into reception, there's a whole lot of plastic stuff all over the place, or does it look quite organically managed? So that's another layer of culture. Then underneath all of that are basic underlying assumptions. So it's the stuff that doesn't get talked about in organizations. So you might get an organization where the values are printed out on a large poster in the staff restaurant, but actually we all know nobody lives those.
Yep.
So the underlying sort of the underlying assumptions are not strong enough or stronger than the espoused values. But I don't think you need to get into those in an interview, but I think to be able to ask what the values are, to see how they're lived, what does that mean? So what does that look like in my day-to-day practice?
Mm-hmm.
And also to understand some of what your own values are. What's important to you? That's all it is. It's values is a posh way of saying, well, what's important to you? What really matters for you? What really matters for you? Maybe I don't know, not selling cosmetics that are tested on animals, for example, as a really simple example. Well, I wouldn't choose to do that because I don't believe that's the right thing to do.
I'm with you.
Yeah. So just at a fundamental level, what's important to you? Because if you are working in a company where something's important to you, but it's not being recognized, or you're working against your values, it can feel really uncomfortable.
It's really easy to overcomplicate the idea of values, isn't it? And I think that idea of just saying, right, what is important to you? What are your kind of, what makes you smile, and what are the things that you just do not want to do?
Yeah.
Using social media as a tool to be able to kind of identify the people who you look at and think, well, actually, you know what? That was dealt with really, really well, the way that they've expressed that. And there are some employers who have absolutely shone, and there's others where you just kind of think, not for me. That's not there. What sort of tone? So company culture and values can be expressed through the voice in social media. What should I be looking for out there that would be the kind of, yes, this is a win, or that's maybe a red flag?
I don't know. I'm maybe not very logical about stuff like this, because I just think if it looks as if I'd enjoy it, does it look like fun? Does it look like it speaks to me? Does it look like I would like working here? Does it look like I could love working here? Or is there something about this that puts me off a little bit? Is there something that I'm not quite sure about?
Mm-hmm.
Your instinct is very strong on stuff like this, I think.
So trust it.
Yes. Yeah.
It can be a challenge in a time when, you know, kind of, as you mentioned at the start, as people are looking for jobs and they're kind of potentially worried, you know, they're thinking maybe I should just take something, but your instinct, your gut instinct will generally guide you down the right path as to whether this is a good place for you to be. And what I would say is, just because it's not, doesn't necessarily feel like a good place for you to be, doesn't make it a bad business, a bad culture, just means it's not the right one for you.
Yeah. I think that sort of brings us on to fit, doesn't it? It is about that fit. And I think the more work you can do for yourself around what's important to you in terms of values, and what skills have you got to offer, what skills would you like to develop, what would you really like to develop in the next job, where would you like this job to take you, is all about fit. Now if you go to buy a pair of shoes, talking of shoes, as we have been doing,
I'll talk about shoes every day.
If you go and buy a pair of shoes, you've kind of got an idea of what your shoe size is, right? You're not going to go and try on shoes which are a completely different size, so you know roughly what your size and shape and everything are, so you can ask for the right size when you go to find your shoes. But that size is also, that fit is also contextual. So if you know you want to, I don't know, learn to ballet dance, then don't go shopping for a pair of boots, because it's not going to fit.
Yep. And it's not going to be fit for task.
No. So it's fit is kind of contextual. The more that you know about yourself, your values, what you see as important, what you think your skills are, what you want to become, how you want this job to develop, how you want to develop in the job, the better equipped you are to get a fit. And fit is more your responsibility as an employee or as a colleague than it is the organization. The organization is the organization. We can't really expect the organization to fit around us, because it doesn't work like that.
Yep.
But I think the way to happiness at work is about finding the right fit. And that the more you know about yourself and the more responsibility we take for ourselves, the more we value ourselves. Sometimes, I see people in the workplace sometimes that are expecting the workplace to value them, but actually they need to value themselves first, and then other people will value them more. The way to get other people to value you is to value yourself first. So all of those things, finding out your skills, understanding what your beliefs are and your values, what's important to you culturally, and how you're going to fit, it is a way of valuing yourself in the workplace.
Thank you very much for your time, Hilary. It's an absolute pleasure.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure. Thanks very much for having me.
A joy.